Hey everybody, it's Mitch and welcome to my next video. Today we have got a special video for you. Today we are going to be talking about monks. Are they good or are they bad? Now, I don't think that I'm the best person to be talking about that on my own. I mean, I'm just going to tell you they're good. But there's a real debate going on with this. So I thought it would be good to have one of my players who believes monks are very bad to debate me on this, and we can discuss this together. So with that said, I'd like to introduce you to Ryan. Yeah. So Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm Ryan. I play Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, and I think that the monk is the weakest class in the player's handbook.
Yes, and you also, and my audience might know you from my Devil videos, my Devil Conquest series, because you are in a few of those videos.
That's correct. I'm a player in Mitch's campaign.
All right, so let's just get into this. We actually haven't rehearsed this at all, so you're going to get the raw uncensored footage of this. We've discussed it a little in text, but so I think monks are great. They're really good. I mean, they're almost as good as the melee class, like a fighter, in terms of combat abilities. But at the same time, they are far more maneuverable, and they're capable of getting around the frontline fighters and going straight for the mages. So plus they get all sorts of crazy shenanigans. So that's why I like the monks. Fairly simple. Plus they get more attacks than other classes, so that's always good.
All right.
Ryan, what's your take here?
Well, I would say that the monk does almost as much damage as the NPC class of the warrior, um, using a great sword and a full attack. Not quite. And they get um, a grab bag of largely situational or underwhelming class features to make up for the fact that improve their defensor utility by a small amount, but ultimately it fails to make up for the fact that they're just not doing enough damage, really.
See,
They don't bring enough to the table on the offensive front. They don't really have many options other than damage. And if you want to go behind enemy lines and take out the casters, there are better ways to do that with other classes.
I really don't see that at all. Like, there's not a lot of better ways. The monks' move speed. I mean, they get to a 10-foot boost every single level. Like,
Well,
that's impressive. And, they start off with the standard 30, but they can get up there really quick. Tumble is a class skill. So they're going to be getting that fairly quickly. Dex is also going to be one of the stats that they're going to be keeping relatively high. So, they're going to
Dex
be
is like the fourth most important stat on a monk.
true, but, it's not one of their dump ones. So their tumble's going to be decent enough to get around, to make most tumble checks in order to get through enemy lines. I mean, with a high,
Tumble's just a skill. Anyone can use that, pretty much.
well,
Um,
yes, but if you need it to be a class skill in order to actually use it super effectively, because you can only put half as many ranks into it if it's not a class skill, and it
well, you
costs
can
the full price for half the ranks.
well, you can increase the skill cap on Tumble just by taking a single level in any class that has it.
Okay, that's
Um,
fair, but still.
which could potentially include fighter if you're using uh, the right variants. Oh, by the way, when I say that the monk does almost as much damage as a warrior, I'm specifically talking if you're only using core material. When you have access to splat books, base attack bonus becomes much more important, as well as using a two-handed weapon, and the monk falls a lot further behind.
The monks get that. Yeah, they don't get the full base attack bonus. Sure, they're going to be about 5 behind by 20th level, but they get that extra attack from Flurry of Blows. In fact, 2 extra attacks. So they're going to get 5 attacks by 20th level, whereas a fighter and other classes with full attack bonus are only going to get 4. So they're better. Like that's more attacks. Plus, their damage dice actually goes up, which is something that's pretty hard to get with anything else. Like you don't see damage dice go up like unless you get bigger, but monks can also get bigger, and that'll also increase it. So that's kind of a moot point because monks get those other bonuses in addition to theirs, which makes their damage dice even bigger. So they do a lot per hit because of that.
Okay, and taking all of that into account, and also the fact that that another class can get a magic weapon for cheaper than the monk can get an amulet of mighty fists.
That's not cool.
And taking into account the fact that somebody using a two-handed weapon adds 1.5 times their strength bonus to damage instead of just 1 times their strength bonus.
That's not quite fair. Monks can use quarterstaffs, and you can give a monk a quarterstaff with, I forget what the ability is called, but they have an ability that they can put a key focus. You can get a quarterstaff with key focus, and then you have a magic weapon. Yeah, you have to. It's an extra plus. That's an extra +1 enhancement for key focus, but it makes it so you can do all your monk stuff with that, and you get the two-handed.
Specifically, it lets you use stunning fist and key strike.
Yeah, but you can you don't get
and quivering palm, I guess, but
pretty much and all your monk stuff other than the fact that the size bonus, your natural attack bonus, you won't get that to those, but everything else you get.
You say everything else like that's a lot of stuff. It really isn't.
Stunning Fist is pretty nasty. I mean, yeah, it's only 1 round, but losing a turn is pretty big. And the fact that they get a ton of them, like they can do Stunning Fist a lot per day. I think it's like equal to monk level or something like that. It's a lot. Like
that is true. You get Stunning Fist uses equal to monk level, and you get an +1/4 of your other levels. So Stunning Fist isn't bad. It's not that good either. You can only use Stunning Fist once per round. You need to declare before you make the attack whether it's going to be a stunning attack or not. And if you miss with the attack, that wastes the stun.
Okay, yeah, but there's ways to make sure that if you put it on your highest attack, it's not likely that it's going to miss, especially at higher levels.
Obviously, you put it on your highest attack, yeah. But, I mean, if you compare that to casting, like, Daze, the cantrip, Quickened, the cantrip is actually going to be slightly better just because it only has a saving throw. It doesn't have to you don't have to make a successful attack roll and then let them fail a save. And that's still disabling actions for 1 round. And it's harder to be immune to. So the Stunning Fist is almost as good as a Quickened cantrip, which is good. It's one of their better. It's one of the better things they get, but it's not like world-shattering.
You are missing one important factor about stunning. They drop whatever they're holding. So if you have weapons and you get hit with stun, you don't have weapons anymore, unless you have things that make it so you don't drop weapons, like
a locked gauntlet.
Yeah, like a locked gauntlet or something. Or there's various things that make it so that you can't drop your weapons, but it's unlikely. It's rare that people have that stuff. More often than not, they don't, because those things can be problematic because it's hard for you to drop them if you want to drop them too.
That is
Um,
true. More often than not, though, you'll be fighting monsters which don't use weapons at all or don't hold anything. They'll just use natural attacks.
that might be true, but that's not always the case. I mean, there's a number of monsters that do, like giants. They almost always are using weapons. Um, I think there's a good number of monsters that use weapons, in all honesty. Pretty much any of the humanoid types, which as you get higher level, you see more and more of those.
Hmm.
Especially like if you start putting NPC levels on monsters, which is a quick and easy way to make monsters better. Is just to throw a couple of NPC, just to throw, well, not, sorry, not NPC, just throw a couple of class levels at them. It's like, oh yeah, you have this giant, let's throw some levels of barbarian at it. Okay, now it's better. Now it's a higher CR. So that's a quick and nerdy way to make your monster stronger, one that DMs use a lot because it's the easiest and most accurate way to do it. Um, in almost all the monsters that you can do that with are humanoid in nature and use weapons. Pretty much any
Well,
monster that you are going to be throwing class levels at uses weapons. At
okay.
least the vast majority. I'd say at least 90%.
I mean, you can. Well, okay. You can use class levels effectively without having weapons. But counterpoint to that, if an enemy is using weapons, there's also a good chance it's using armor, right?
That is true.
And if that's the case, and it's at a high level, there's a good chance they have enchanted armor, right?
Yes.
And if they happen to have the fortification enchantment on their armor, they can't be affected by Stunning Fist because they'll be immune to crits.
Interesting. Wasn't aware that fortification blocked stunning. Interesting.
Well, it's immunity to crits. I mean, Stunning Fist. It doesn't block stunning in general. It blocks Stunning Fist specifically because Stunning Fist. Let's see.
I hadn't noticed anything. Book right here. As far as I know, stunning.
Creatures immune to critical hits cannot be stunned. In the
Okay,
description of Stunning
interesting.
Fist.
So okay, yeah, but that would require the heavy fortification, which is a +3 enchant. Or no, that's a +5, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So that's hard to get. That's expensive, and it really prohibits you from getting any other enchantments without going epic. So that's problematic. Um, and the other forms of fortification, moderate is what, +3? So that's 75% chance. Okay, 75% chance stunning won't work. With light, that's only a +1, but only 25%. Moderate's really moderate's kind of the best fortification in all honesty, um, at least in terms of bang for your buck. Uh, you gain a lot for a +2 enchantment. You get 75%, whereas you have to put an extra +2 on it just to get that extra 25% with heavy fortification.
Yeah, I'd
So
agree with that.
yeah, light's not a bad option, but because it is only a +1. But yeah, um, which makes sense. But I see your point on this. But like I say, fortification, I don't see a lot of them using heavy fortification. That I see that being pretty rare. In terms of moderate, okay, I can see a fair number of people using that, but when you're talking about monsters with just some NPC, their loot isn't super great because they only get a couple of levels of it worth, so they're not going to have full gear, and that's gonna that's gonna hurt that's gonna hurt what they can afford. So moderate, I'd say it's unlikely they'll have light. Okay, sure, but 25% chance isn't great. 75% chance of working still pretty good for the most part. Of course, that's 75% chance, assuming all the other stuff still hits, like the attack hits and they make the save.
Yeah,
which the
fails.
attack probably will hit. That's got a probably 90 to 95% chance of hitting um, if you're doing it right. And the save, that can be a little trickier. That's
Well,
what.
the saving throw is based off of wisdom, which isn't a pump stat for monks in the same way it is for clerics.
Not
Because
necessarily true.
it's competing with strength and constitution, right? Actually,
Mm,
there's a question. In what order would you say the stats are important for monk?
That's a great question. Um, I would say wisdom is definitely one of the most important. Um, I'd say it's probably the most important. I know you said Dex as a fourth, which, I mean, maybe, but Dex could also be could even be first or second in all reality. It's not going to work for damage, but Dex is your attack, and generally, as well
Is
as
it?
your AC.
Are you taking weapon finesse on the monk then?
You could, it
Um,
works,
I mean, you could.
but
Weapon finesse doesn't work with the quarterstaff. Just
okay, that's fair. It really depends on how you're building this monk, though. Like we can't assume the monk's any certain way. There's a lot of different ways to build the monk, more so than other classes for the most part, because the monk has 4 core stats, which is a drawback, but it does make them more versatile in how you build them. Personally,
does that?
well,
I,
there's
I
different.
mean, if you're building a fighter, you put your highest stat in strength and your second highest in constitution, and you're good, pretty
Not
much.
always.
Often you want a 13 intelligence for combat expertise.
There's a number of fighters that there are definitely fighter builds out there that are really great that you dump strength and you put all your highest into dex and your second into con and you call that good.
How do you deal damage then?
Um, you don't dump strength too much, but that'd be like maybe your third or something, third or fourth. Um, and you use a bow or you either use a bow or you use finesse weapons.
Hmm.
Yes, you're going to want strength decent, but you get your damage from your weapons.
The bow, I can see that. Um, you
There's
get your
also
damage
rapier
from your
builds,
weapons? What does that mean? Like from...
+5 weapons. Throw some enchantments on them that do more damage, that kind of stuff. Um, Plus, there's feats that can add stuff. I know you don't like. I know you would argue those feats aren't particularly good. Feats like
Weapon focus and weapon specialization, you
and
mean?
greater weapon focus and greater weapon specialization, yes. But
Yes, I would in fact argue those aren't especially good. Uh,
um, and the
Although
later ones are
fighters using just the core books don't really have much that's better than that. There's a real lack of good feats in
those
place
are
in the
also
book.
fighter only. Other than weapon focus, all those are fighter only feats. One of the requirements for them is actually that you have sufficient levels in the class fighter.
Yeah,
And
although
it's
Warblade can also get them by...
yeah, they have other requirements too, but one of them is you have to be a fighter. Weapon focus
Right.
is the only one in the weapon focus, weapon specialization line that doesn't require you to be a fighter.
Right.
But anyways, we're talking about the monks. So
Yeah,
we
the
don't want to
monk.
talk. We don't want to talk too much about the fighters, other than to compare as to why uh, monks would be good or bad. Um, but yeah, so I don't know, like dealing like I know you like to do crazy damage on attacks. There's
Not
more, huh?
not me, no.
But there,
But well, yeah, no, yeah. Actually, I do. If you're going to be making attacks, if you're going to be spending your actions on that, then you ought to be dealing a pretty good amount of damage.
okay, that's fair enough. Um, I
I'm
will admit that the amount of damage that you've been able to come up with, and that a lot of people have been able to come up with, really min-max is far higher than what the devs had in mind. So probably a good 2-3 times, maybe even 4 times higher than what they were thinking. But I get where you're coming from with that, which is part of why you say monks tend to have less damage. But there's ways around that for sure. Um, yes, solo, I see what you're saying, but in a party. Now, if you have party members with lots of buff stuff, like a good bard, that extra attack that monks get is really going to mean a lot.
And if you have a bard doing just normal bardic inspiration, then it's going to mean more. It would mean more if you could take that plus to hit and dump it into power attack.
Uh, maybe. Uh, Even more if you go your Dragonfire inspiration route, then it gets even crazier. But
Sure, Dragonfire inspiration um, really benefits from or really works well with builds that do lots of attacks, which is some of them. But
no,
it's kind of a niche case. Most cases where you can, well, no, I guess there are cases where you can boost damage through class features and through spells. Um, the monk benefits pretty well if someone else can boost their damage like that. Uh, they don't.
I, I
Okay,
get.
so just to be clear, with the amount of uh, damage that I can get by min-maxing, I've tended to go for like non like with the Jutsu focus build I have on Rain. That's not using like the typical. All you really need to get good damage in melee is Complete Warrior.
Huh.
And like that introduces Shock Trooper and Leap Attack. So you take Shock Trooper, and its prerequisite improve Bull Rush. You take Leap Attack. You use Leap Attacks with you use charging um, as your main form of attack, and you can just casually add um, 60 points of damage on every attack with a two-handed weapon, or on every charge. And you don't get an attack penalty from power attack because with Shock Trooper that goes to your AC instead. So you can rely on things like mischance, like from Blink or a Cloak of Displacement for your defenses instead. And just completely ignore armor class um, and be and, and deal considerable. I mean, after that, there's other things like you can like there are other like once you have that core shock trooper leap attack thing, there are other things you can do to make it better, like charge multipliers. For instance, Valorous Weapon is kind of broken to be honest, but even with like mounted combat, you could
And why can't you
you
put that
can
on a monk?
you can, but with but you won't get the same returns on power attack because you're not using a two-handed weapon, unless you're using a quarterstaff.
Which doesn't hurt
In which
things
case,
much.
in
Using a
which case,
quarterstack really doesn't hurt you too much as a monk.
in which
Uh,
case, you still won't get the same returns on power attack because you don't have full base attack bonus.
that's fair, but I mean, we're talking about what, 10 less damage at worst?
Let's
That's not
see.
so bad.
At most, if it's a difference of 5 base attack bonus,
Which would be 10 damage.
with leap attack, that's 15 damage. With multipliers, that like with Spirited Charge, for example, that would be more like 45 damage. A difference per attack.
What? You're talking about 60 damage. Um,
Sure. And then you use Spirited Charge, like the mounted combat feat, to triple it and get 180 damage per attack. Spirited Charge with the lance, specifically. Or you could use other charge multipliers, like Battle Jump, or the Valorous Weapon, or, hang on, I can look up a list, the thing that half-orcs get from Races of Destiny that lets them deal double damage on a charge. There are a lot of damage multiplier things that are designed to work specifically with charges.
Okay, well, that I take your point on this, but it'd be easier for a monk to get the charge. Charging is a difficult thing to do. And the fact that monks are a lot faster, that's going to make it so that you're in charging range more often than you are with the other classes, which has its advantages.
Okay, let's talk about speed then. So the monk gets a total plus 60 foot bonus to its move speed over a 20 level career.
That's true, although in epic level they'll hit another 10 right away.
Sure, but I don't think most tables play epic because it's just so broken and god-awful in general.
Hard to say.
So, plus 60 feet of speed is a lot. Unfortunately, I mean, like, the barbarian only gets 10 feet, right?
That is correct.
But the barbarian's 10-foot speed bonus is untyped, and the monk's speed bonus is enhancement, which means it doesn't stack with any other enhancement bonuses to speed. Like, for instance, Expeditious Retreat, which gives you a plus 30 enhancement bonus to speed from a first level spell. Or Haste, which gives you a plus 30-foot enhancement bonus to speed from a third level spell that hits the whole party and also gives extra attacks. And so it's a very important.
The monk would still benefit from the extra attacks. I'm pretty sure the monk would still get that 6th attack. I don't think Haste is going to stop. I'm pretty sure Haste would stack with Flurry of Blows.
Sure, they would stack, yeah. And so the monk is going to get that extra attack from Haste, although it's not going to be the monk's best attack is not as good as the fighter or barbarian or even the warrior's best attack.
That's true.
But they're not going to benefit from the speed increase unless, they can...
At low levels they will, but you're right.
Yeah. At high levels, well...
Now, I know you love cheese. One thing that you can do with a monk build is start out with your first level in barbarian, then change your alignment to lawful, and then go monk, and then you will get the barbarian's 10-foot bonus. And with your 19 levels of monk, you'll end up with, still your 60 foot, so a total of 70 feet bonus. So.
Planning to change your alignment after level 1 is a bit cheese. That's right.
But I do not argue that in the slightest. That is something that a lot of DMs probably won't allow, but it is technically legal if you do change your alignment at level 1, and then when you level up to level 2 to go lawful. There's ways to make it work, though, like especially if you're starting at level 1, say, hey, so my character was this criminal barbarian, and he just got out of jail, and so he's changed his alignment. He was he was chaotic, but after that run-in with the law, he's changed his ways, and that, I mean, you might be able to talk a DM into allowing that.
Probably want to go from neutral to lawful, but yeah.
And that works because barbarians don't actually need to be non-lawful. They just cannot. You just cannot gain levels in barbarian while being lawful.
That is true. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that monks become more powerful when you take levels in classes. When they take levels in classes that aren't monk?
Well, barbarian's got its advantages. They will get that speed bonus a little quicker than the monks do. It's just they never gain any beyond first level. So there's that. But another advantage of the monk speed bonus is if you gain other types of movement, then your speed bonus will apply to all of those. So if you gain a fly speed, like through becoming a dragonborn and choosing the wings, um, then you will have a faster fly speed because all your monk levels will stack to that. I've seen this done to crazy effect. Just absolutely insane fly speeds. Um, yeah, you can
Sure,
just
okay. But haste also does that.
uh, yes, but not as well. The haste will only add at most 30 feet, whereas the monk doesn't actually have a cap. It's just in 20 levels at 60 feet. If you're going into epic, their speed bonus never goes away. Every 3 levels, they just keep getting 10 feet forever, which is kind of insane.
Ooh, okay. You're saying that you should take more than 20 levels of monk. Great.
Well, if you're going in, if you're going to go for it, uh, yeah. And there's a lot of advantages to taking epic classes because you get epic bonus feats every 2 to 4 levels depending on class. I think monk is the standard 3. Actually, it could be 5. I'm not even sure. But every so often you get an extra bonus. You get an extra epic bonus feat, which those are really crazy good and broken. So taking advantage of those extra ones is really nice. And that extra damage is pretty good. Plus, their AC will go up they continue to get bonuses to their AC. They have spell resistance, which I know there's problems with that because um, that applies to both beneficial and detrimental spells. However, that's easy enough to get around. You can get rid of your spell resistance as a standard action.
As a standard action, yeah, meaning it usually won't be viable in combat.
Sure, but it's easy enough to just say, hey, let's get our buffs done ahead of time, more
That's
often
fine.
than not.
That's fine for long duration buffs, and it's not really something you want to be doing for round per level buffs like haste. It's not something you want to be doing for healing. No. I
Although,
mean,
okay, I get what you're
if
saying
there
with
happens to be
healing,
a
but
case
monks
where
they do have a self heal.
it's really bad.
It's just as good as the paladins lay on hands, except for that they can only use it on themselves.
I'm sure that's not the case.
It is. It is the stats are identical. The only difference between the monks and the paladins is the paladins can use it on others, the monks cannot. That is the only difference between the two.
Wholeness of body heals a number of hit points equal to twice your current monk level each day. The Paladin's Lay on Hands can heal a number of total hit points equal to Paladin level times Charisma bonus, which is way more.
Mm-hmm. I know I looked this up at one point. I could have sworn they were identical. Purity
Plus,
bond.
there are feats that can make, and prestige class features and stuff that can make Lay on Hands better. I don't think there's anything that can make Wholeness of Body good.
It's still not bad. Um, one advantage of this is it doesn't appear to take an action to use wholeness of body.
And it's a supernatural ability, so it's a standard action unless otherwise specified.
Interesting. But that
So
is
you'd be using a
that is
standard
one
action
thing
to
about
heal like 40 hit points at level 20. That's not really an efficient use of actions, even compared to other healing spells, which aren't generally great in combat aside from heal itself.
okay. Well, depends on what level you're at. Um, Usually your the highest level healing spell that you're capable of casting is generally pretty effective in combat. Um, like whatever that happens to be. Like Cure Light Wounds is very effective in combat at low levels. Cure Moderate is at slightly higher levels, and so on and so forth.
No.
At like first, second level, Cure Light Wounds is quite effective.
At first level, Cure Light Wounds is good. Yes. Well, yeah. First,
That's what
second
I'm
level,
saying.
sure.
And
I'll acknowledge
and
that.
then once you and then third and fourth level, Cure Moderate's good. Uh, fifth and sixth, and then the next two levels, Cure Serious is good. Like the highest level Cure spell that you have access to is good in combat regardless.
I don't really agree with that either, but
So you're
it's
saying
kind of
at
tangential at this point.
so you're saying it fair enough. Although I would say at fourth level Cure Moderate's pretty good. It's definitely worth the standard action. Anyways, let's see.
Um,
One thing is most of these monks' abilities, they are, uh, there's a large number of the monks' abilities, with the exception of the higher level special stuff, are extraordinary abilities. So, like their unarmed strike, their I'm pretty sure their stunning fist is also extraordinary. They gain evasion at second level, so that's pretty good. I know there's rings of evasion, which make that a little less impressive, but evasion is amazing. I'm not sure which book Ring of Evasion is from.
that'd be the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Okay, so that would be Splat. Sorry, not Splat. That would be Core.
Yep.
Okay, but so that does make it a little bit more of a moot point, but it does take up an item slot. So I mean that's something. Whereas these guys don't need that. I know that if you're using splat rules, then item slots aren't super important because you just have to pay an extra 50% cost, and it goes on the cheapest thing. So that's not a huge issue. But if you're sticking with core, the fact that they get evasion is pretty nice. Because even if someone wanted a ring of evasion, it at least takes up their ring slot, and then they can't use that ring slot, well, one of their ring slots, so they only get one other ring to do stuff with if they want the ring of evasion. So and monks don't have to worry about that. They get 2 levels in, that's nothing.
Evasion is pretty well. Yeah, evasion is pretty good, but I mean,
Evasion is amazing. Evasion has saved you guys so many times.
it's very nice, yeah. But they get it at level 2. I mean, the first 2 levels of monk are good. I will agree with that. And up to level 6 even, that's fine. But there just is very little that's good after level 6.
Okay,
Like,
and that's when they start getting their supernatural abilities. Most of the stuff they get up to level 6 is all extraordinary. The fast movement is extraordinary. And the
except the
reason
key
why I point
strike.
this out is anti-magic fields become more and more common as you become higher level. And you lose a lot of stuff.
Well, the best way that a player character can handle an anti-magic field is generally by not being in one.
Well, that's not
Like,
always an option.
yeah, I mean you've demonstrated that. Yeah, I'd like to see a monk overcome any kind of damage reduction in an anti-magic field, though.
Um,
Like
hmm.
without being boosted by anything, their unarmed damage is 11 plus strength on average. So the monk is not going to be taking down a colossus, no matter what you do with it.
Let me try. I'm trying to look here. Oh yeah, and key strike. That's where they get their They get their damage reduction adamantine and magic and all that fun stuff. And that is supernatural. So yes, they would lose that in an anti-magic field, as you're saying. Okay, that's fair. Although outside of an anti-magic field, they're very good at taking down pretty much any sort of. They can get through pretty much any. Yeah, they get through pretty much any sort of damage reduction. At yeah, like their key strike gets through pretty much any DR outside of it when they're not in an anti-magic field. So that's pretty nice. DR can be really nasty, and the fact that by once they start getting to higher levels, they just ignore damage reduction is pretty good.
Okay, well, let's see. They're treated as magic, lawful, and adamantine. It's pretty easy to get a weapon that's treated as magic, aligned, and adamantine. You usually wouldn't go for lawful, though, because I can't think of many things other than like the chaotic neutral outsiders that have DR lawful. The chaotic evil ones, I think, tend to have DR good, right?
I think so. I haven't looked at them too closely, but there are ways to get other stuff. Like I know my friend, he had a his was a he had taken a vow of poverty, and he had gained a bunch of stuff that way. Which that's another thing that can make monks great is vow of poverty just fits really well onto them. They it really doesn't hurt them that much, far less than most other classes.
That's another thing that I disagree with you on. The Vow of Poverty is an incredibly complex thing to take down just because there's the kinds of things you can get from magic items, like in power and stuff, is just such a broad spectrum.
This is true. They gain a lot of that from the vow of poverty, and with some of the things like he had gained his attacks all counted as good as well. So all of his attacks were lawfully good aligned. Um, so he had that. He had also done some other shenanigans from the Races of the Dragon where he had a grafted tail put on. So he got a tail attack, which gained a number of benefits because of Monk. Like, so, like he was able to apply his unarmed damage bonus to that tail attack to make it even stronger.
Tail
So
graft should be fine if you get it before you take the vow, but you'd have to refuse the tail, I think, after getting the vow because it's wealth.
okay, fair.
Are you
Although
talking graft in like the fiend folio sense, where like it's a magic, it's like a flesh that you graft onto your body and
um,
has a cost and stuff?
I do believe it does have a cost. It's from Races of Dragon, not Fiend Folio, but I believe it is the same principles.
Okay,
Um,
it's slightly different. The graft rules. There's like old style grafts which are in the Fiend Folio and Lords of Madness and stuff, and then new style grafts like they have in the Races of the Dragon and Eberron and stuff, and they work a little differently, but it's basically the same. Yeah.
yeah, although at the same time, you don't have to refuse it. You just can't pay for it yourself. So, say one of your teammates decides they want to be nice and pay for that for you, then that works.
No. Uh, well, okay. Let's see. You may not use any magic item of any sort. You can benefit from magic items used on your behalf. You can drink a potion a friend gives you, receive a spell cast from a wand, scroll, or staff. You may not, however, borrow a cloak of resistance or any other magic item for even a single round, nor may you yourself cast a spell from a scroll, wand, or staff.
I would say that having that grafted on you that's actually a gray rule because it's hard to say whether it's closer to just having a potion, drinking a potion. Like, I mean, they're basically just putting that on you, or you know, you're not actively using it or anything. Like you're just kind of there. I mean, worst case, I mean, there's definitely scenarios where you can make it work for sure. Like, say your team just decides yeah, we're going to knock him out or wait till he's sleeping and then just graft it on him while he's sleeping. Like, okay, well, you just gained a tail and that's cool, I guess. You know, there's way, it's a gray area. I think it really depends on your DM. But yes, if you had it put on ahead of time, it's not like you can take the graft off later. So it becomes a part of your body. So if you did it before taking the vow of poverty, yeah. Um, although taking it at first level does become a bit of an issue because you want to take that vow of poverty as soon as possible.
Well, that sort of depends. Another thing you could do with the vow of poverty, although it sort of violates the spirit of it, is to just use a bunch of like +5 tomes and manuals to get inherent bonuses to ability scores, and then take the vow of poverty at like a high character level. And
That's
all you
yes
really
and
lose
no
out.
good. Epic, because I don't know if you gain this at, I think you gain it a little bit before 20th level, but when you get into Epic, you actually, the Epic Vow of Poverty will actually give you all those benefits. And some of the things you get from it are amazing. Like you can actually one of the benefits that you can choose to take for Epic Vow of Poverty is you can actually have your base attack bonus replaced with that of a fighter, so you can gain the full base attack bonus that way.
Oh, so it's like a wand of divine power,
Yeah,
which costs like a couple thousand gold.
well, this is permanent though.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure a wand of divine power is not permanent, especially with a couple thousand gold.
That's correct. It would not be.
But and then sure takes an action. Whereas this, you just have that forever. Vow of Poverty, like my friend with the vow, he was a dragonborn monk with the wings and the tail graft with the vow of poverty. It was absolutely insane. His fly speed was crazy. His plus he had that extra tail attack. He had a lot of craziness going on with his character. Um, plus monks are like the only class in the game, well not quite the only, but pretty much the only class in the game that has all good saves.
I'm sorry, that has what?
It has all good saves. They have a good
Oh,
fortitude
right,
save,
yeah.
a good reflex save, a good will save. There's like no other class that has that.
That is true.
And
Yeah.
wisdom really should be them. I really do think wisdom's probably your best bet for best stat for a monk. Probably wisdom. Then I'd say maybe strength. Um, then it's kind of a toss-up between dex and con. It's really
Okay.
hard to say, but I think wisdom's probably your best bet, at least in 3.5. I know in five. I know when I went to go play one in 5e, I didn't realize that dex is very clearly their best stat. But
Yeah, well, Dex is real good in 5e.
yeah, they changed so much stuff in that because that's like your damage. But anyways, this is 3.5.
Yep.
They're so broken in 5e though. Oh my god, they're amazing.
So prioritizing wisdom, I guess. So that's going to boost your armor class and your flurry of blows, or not flurry of blows. Sorry, your stunning fist DC.
Yep.
And your quivering palm DC.
Quivering palm.
As much as that matters.
Quivering palm can be amazing. I have seen that used to amazing effect. My friend, he with his monk, he decided. I threw this just nasty with. I think it was a wizard. This guy had mind rape. This guy had just the nastiest spells I could find to throw at the party, and first turn this wizard, he uses mind rape and on the fighter, which should have gone absolutely horribly, but because of just insanely good luck, the fighter managed to make the save and was not mind raped, despite the fact that the chances of that were so astronomically low. And on top of that, uh, like I think it was I was playing with like special rules at the time, but had I not, then it would have been a 5% chance that he failed, and he actually pulled it off. It was just insane. Um, we calculated the odds of him pulling it off ahead of time, and like he did it by some miracle. But anyways, he didn't. This wizard didn't get a second turn because before that happened, his monk ran right up to him, quivering palm, dead, just dead. It's like, well, that sucks. Because like I say, monks are really good at taking out your casters, and quivering palm's pretty dang good against casters. They usually have crap for fortitude saves. That's generally their worst save. And
Arcane casters, you mean? Not the cleric
that's
or the
true.
druid.
Divine casters tend to be a little better because it's at least a good save, but they're generally not dumping too much into their constitution. Um,
Really?
although that can vary.
Hmm.
But with
That,
arcane casters are the ones you generally tend to be the nastier ones. And yeah, when you're going for your casters, man, these guys that quivering palm can really wreck an arcane caster. It can just one shot them like that. Yeah, it's once per week, but if you're playing your monk right, you just like, well, guess I'm not going to adventure for another week. Let's just chill for a little bit. If that's an option, do it. Um,
that depends on your campaign, I suppose.
yeah,
Sometimes once a week just means once an encounter, and sometimes once a week means once a campaign.
yes,
Um,
that's true. Although I say it's pretty rare that it'd be once a campaign, though it's a little rare that it's once an encounter as well. But
well, typical adventuring day um, is 4 encounters is what's assumed. So on average. So if you're under some sort of time constraint, like you have an important quest and somebody's trying to take over the world or something, then you probably get to use Quivering Palm once every 28 encounters, roughly.
it's also something you
Um,
don't gain till fairly high level,
yep, at
15th level.
15th
That
level.
I mean that.
And then if you miss, it uses up the Quivering Palm.
Okay, that's fair. Although
Um,
although if you're going for an arcane caster, it's pretty unlikely you'll miss. Like, unless you roll a nat 1, you're not going to miss.
I mean, it depends on the arcane caster, and it also depends on if they have like concealment effects or such, like
Okay,
displacement
okay.
or mirror image.
Although monks are often
Um,
going to be able to have things to get around that, like True Sight. I'm pretty sure by high level, True Sight is just something you get for, not monks, but for Vow of Poverty. So if you went that
yeah,
route, you'd have it, or if you didn't go that route, you'd probably want to have it anyways,
at level 18, yeah, the monk can, or your Vow of Poverty monk can have True Seeing. That's correct. Um,
which would get right around all that concealment and all that stuff. Most of the stuff that an arcane caster would use. True Seeing would bypass most of it.
so yeah, it would bypass some of the defenses. I mean, it wouldn't bypass luminous armor or wings of cover or uh, the abrupt jaunt. Um,
Yes, there's some truth to that. Um, but the thing about Quivering Palm is you don't know, your opponent won't know you're using it until you use it. Like, you put it on the attack, but you're like you'll have to declare it to the DM, but you can do that in secret because your opponent doesn't get to know that it's Quivering Palm until you choose to activate it, which I think that's a free action, isn't it, for Quivering Palm to actually activate it?
what? It's a It is a free action to activate it, yeah? It says you need to announce your intent before making your attack roll.
Yes, but
which is...
you have to tell your DM, but you don't have to like tell your opponent that, hey, this is a quivering palm, because they have no way of knowing that it's a quivering palm until it's activated.
That is true. So I guess you could use it on like the second or third attack roll, since those are equally likely to hit.
Yeah, and then those guys they'll have to guess, okay, which one's it coming on? Or maybe you decide to risk it a little more, throw it on the fourth one to throw them off, because they're like, it's definitely not going to be the fourth one, but then it is, because that's still probably pretty likely to hit. So there's a lot of games you can play with that. And another thing with Quivering Palm, even if you don't want to use it instantly, you can use that to do a lot of really interesting things, to really cause some craziness to happen. Like, say you put it on, say there's this guy who's like, yeah, I'm the greatest, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's this arcane caster, and you go in your fight, you hit him with Quivering Palm, but he doesn't know it, because you didn't activate it yet. And then, you run away afterwards, and he's like, ha ha, it sucks for you. And then, you just kind of keep an eye on him for a while from a distance, and you wait till just the right moment, and you just be like, okay, now you're dead. Like, no one knows what happened. Just suddenly this guy just dies. And you can, if you play your cards right, you can make it seem like anything killed him. Like, say you're trying to set up some sort of coup, like maybe you have one of your, maybe some noble say, I can challenge that wizard to a fight. And then, like, as he swings his sword at the wizard maybe casts Wings of Cover to protect himself. And then you're just like, activate Quivering Palm. He dies instantly anyways. Wow, that worked. This level one kid who challenged this powerful wizard actually won in the fight. And, maybe people start believing that. And like, your quest was to try and, help this guy take over or something. You can use
Or you
it for
could just cast
shenanigans like
glibness
that. Huh?
Or you could just cast glibness for a plus 30 to bluff checks and say that he was beaten in a fight by a level 1 wizard, and people will believe you.
For a time, but what if the guy shows up later? I mean, I guess you could just kill him another way, sure, but I don't know. You'd have to get that. If evidence came to say that wasn't the case, then that would change things, because the evidence can definitely change your DC pretty drastically. Like, I mean, if you tried to bluff something that's like, if you tried to bluff, oh, hey, he killed him, when the guy's still standing there, like the guy, like if you say, yeah, this level 1 guy beat the wizard, and then like the guy, that would be a pretty hard bluff check actually, because that's really, really unlikely. So the DC would be pretty high. And then should the guy come walking into town later, that's going to raise the DC up even higher. And a lot of the people that may have believed it before are going to be like, I don't know about this. I mean, I'm looking at him. I don't think he's dead. It takes a really high DC. It's going to be a crazy high DC to actually to actually convince somebody that the guy who you're looking at and is breathing and talking and casting spells is dead and was killed by a level 1 warrior. Like, that's going to be a real tough sell. The DC will be ridiculous.
Okay, sure.
I get what you're saying with glibness, but there's limits to that. Whereas actually doing the thing, people will believe it because they freaking saw it, and there's no way around that. So yeah, some people might be skeptical, but they saw the sword hit, and then they saw the guy die, and I mean, how else do you explain that? Especially
invisible spell?
Okay, there's some things with that, but um, if somebody in the crowd happened to have true seeing, they would not see anything. So the point is,
Uh, uh,
true seeing or see invisibility.
I,
Um,
I mean, I get that the whole later activation thing isn't completely useless if we're going by strict technical definitions of those terms. It just seems very niche.
it is
Um,
somewhat niche, but it can be very useful in a lot of campaign settings where you're trying to achieve some goal other than just kill the bad guy, which I know you haven't seen a ton of that kind of stuff because my campaign doesn't have much of that and you haven't played in many others, but that is somewhat common in a lot of games.
well, yeah, but spells. I
There's
mean,
some truth to that, but you got to admit that they're a lot better than a fighter at that kind of stuff.
that depends on which fighter feats you're taking.
There's not many that can kill a high level wizard from a large distance away without anybody realizing without any sort of sign that you were the one who took him down.
Uh, I,
The only one I can think of is Ring the Golden Bell, and that one's not the best for fighters. That one's actually much better for monks because I believe that uses wisdom, which
I can think of
is
a skill trick that does it, called Mosquito's Bite, where you hit somebody and then they don't like feel the damage until a round later.
yeah, but that's still only a round. Like if you do that in front of a crowd, people are going to be like, "Oh yeah, there was that guy there a round ago." You know, maybe he did something. Whereas with the monk, like,
Then you use Time Hop to send them into the future, so it's actually more than a round. That way, it's
okay,
the same.
that is that a
It,
is that a fighter thing?
no, that's a Scion thing.
That's what I thought.
Let's see. I don't know.
Well, you get what I'm saying.
I I do
I mean, they
get what
also
you're
get,
saying. There's
uh,
just yeah.
and
Okay.
instead of getting stunning fist, they can always choose to
I mean,
get.
a fighter can use a bow, which can
That's
lead to some
true.
pretty cool stuff.
Monks can also get improved grapple instead of stunning fist, so that's an option if they wanted to go that route.
That
So,
is
huh?
monks. I mean, fighters can also get improved grapple.
Yeah, they can also get
Um,
stunning fist. It's just stunning fist is better for monks than it is for fighters.
and improved grapple is better for fighters than it is for monks. So
Um,
the things that you add to a grappling check, right, are size bonuses, base attack bonus, and strength, right?
which one of them is equal for both of them, that being size bonus, and then
And
base
then
attack and strength are generally be higher on the fighter. That is true. Um, she can also get combat reflexes or deflect arrows at second level. Those are both pretty good. Deflect arrows is definitely nice. Um, combat reflexes also really nice. Being able to get those extra attacks of opportunity.
those are nice, yeah, but yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Fighters can
Fighters could
get
pick
good
them as
use
bonus
of
feats as well,
combat
but
reflexes because they can use a weapon that has reach.
uh, monks can too. Quarterstaffs do have reach.
They do not.
You sure? I'm pretty sure quarterstaffs have a.
I'm
I'm pretty sure there's quarterstaff's a weird one where you can use it two different ways, if I recall.
Yeah, you can use it. Well, it's a double weapon. It's the only double weapon that's a simple weapon. Most double weapons are exotic, so you can use it as a two-handed weapon, or you can use basically two weapon fight with both ends. So it's a one-handed weapon and a light weapon. But it's not a reach weapon, regardless of how
Interesting.
you use it.
Okay, well, at the same time, it's the fact that you can switch that up is pretty impressive. Like, you can use it as a two-handed weapon to get that power attack in if you want to go that route. But if you want to, if you've got, buffs to get more attacks, you got the double weapon so you can hit more, you can get more attacks in. So that's always really good.
I guess.
I mean, especially
Um,
seeing as you can effectively get 5 attacks, like using it as a double weapon, you'd get like 10 attacks.
uh, you, you'll take some huge penalties for two-weapon fighting with it if you don't have the two-weapon fighting feats.
You can take the two-weapon fighting feat.
And power attack?
I see where you're getting at. That's a lot of feats. Let's see. On the 6th level, they get what? Improved disarm or improved trip.
Yeah, so the 6th level monk feat is quite good, actually. It's one of the reasons that 6th monk level is a good level. I mean, they get a point of base attack bonus, point to every save, and a speed increase, but also improved trip is quite good, getting it as a bonus feat this way. Do you know why that is?
I'm assuming it's because the prereqs are kind of hard, and this doesn't require you to meet the prereqs.
Yeah, exactly. Normally, improved trip requires you to have combat expertise, which is not a good feat unless you like combat with other stuff. Uh, but but the bigger thing is that improved trip normally requires you to have 13 intelligence. Monk doesn't need that.
Which the intelligence is going to be one of the monk's 2 dump stats, so their int is generally going to be pretty low.
Yeah. The
So
only problem is that a monk is categorically bad at tripping because they can't use, or because reach weapons are not monk weapons. So
it doesn't. There's a certain amount of sense that makes though. Um, plus, um, monks do gain the so monks can still attack even while bound, as long as any part of their body is as long as basically any part of their body can still move, they can still attack just fine. Like you can handcuff a monk and he can still attack just as easily. Handcuffing a monk does not handicap him in the slightest. That will very much handicap pretty much any other class in the game. Like there are very few classes that are anywhere near as effective while handicapped while handcuffed as they are when not. Like fighters, barbarians, they can't really attack anymore. Casters, they can't really attack anymore. Like you handcuff guy, most classes, they're pretty much useless. The only one that might, other than the monk, that might be decent is the bard, and I say might because it really depends on which perform skill they decided to go into. If it's singing or oratory, they're fine. Other than that, they're probably not going to be able to do it. Or at least they'll take some penalties. Like, I guess dancing, you could probably do at a penalty.
all
But
right. I mean that is true. Again, like with anti-magic field, I'll say that the best way to deal with your opponent's handcuffing you is to not let your opponents handcuff you.
that's true, although I've seen it put to good use. Um, in a previous campaign I ran, my friend who played the monk with the vow of poverty, he pretended to be a captive in order to gain entrance into the enemy base so that he could scout it out ahead of time.
If he accepted the handcuffs, he should have lost the vow of poverty because they have value.
They're not really his property, so
You can't borrow them either,
well,
not even for a single round.
I don't know about that because at the same time we're talking about you are allowed clothing I mean, you can wear clothing, so
You can wear simple clothes.
I don't.
Handcuffs are not simple.
I don't. I wouldn't say something that binds you is gonna impair that.
Uh,
So, I mean, yeah. So he was
but
able, but anyways, he was able to get in. He is able to infiltrate the base, and uh, yeah, and he was able to get out. Partially, one of his main methods of getting out, I think he used, what was it? Was it Abundant Step? Yeah, he used Abundant Step to get out, which just great. They have Abundant Step and Empty Body, which are very good for escaping a lot of situations.
yeah, well, I mean, empty body is really cool. It's just a shame you get it so late.
It
Um,
is 19th level, kind of sucks, but it
Abundant
is
step, I mean, just use a wand. Dimension door is a 4th level spell, and that way you can get it more than once per day.
okay, but that's hard to do if you don't have caster levels.
Yeah,
Wands are tricky to use if you don't have caster levels. Rogues are all right at it because it's just really easy for them to get use magic device, but it's pretty hard to get use magic device up to high enough skill level that you're able to do it very effectively. And even then, it's still not 100% ever.
well, I mean, you still want to do it if you have used magic device as a class skill.
Well, of
I
course.
find that it's often worth. It's just such a good skill. Like I'll usually even put a couple points into it cross class. Um,
Well, use magic device is good unless you're like a third caster, then it becomes far less useful.
true. Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, you
I
still
can
wouldn't be able
just
to
do
cast.
this anyways. I've got access to both arcane and divine spellcasting classes. Why would I bother?
Well,
There's
the cleric and druid spell lists are
That's true.
still
Although if you
have
went
a
like
decent.
Archivist Wizard,
That would
then
work. Yeah.
then there's not a whole lot of spells that you don't have access to. So
Bard spells.
yeah, and then I guess there's
Litmus.
also like Wu Jin and things like that. Same with
Yeah.
a number of Paladin and Ranger, but so there are some, but the vast majority of spells you just can do if you go that route. Um,
Yeah.
let's see. Another thing with cheese, this one is a little harder to do cheese, and that's with Timeless Body. So if you manage to get 17th levels of monk, and then something happens, or maybe you're starting at high level. Um, if you're starting at high level, this actually is a lot easier to do and talk your DM into letting you do. You say, hey, yeah, I was a monk. I retired. I gained 17 levels. Then I retired for a while, and now I'm back to fight again. Like, that works. It's a little harder if you're starting out. But if you do with Timeless Body, you can effectively just gain yourself a nice +3 to all your mental stats, which is nice. Now, two of those stats are your dump stats, so that's a bit of an issue. But the other one is your one is probably your most important stat, so that's good.
Okay. I mean, you're waiting like 80 years to get +2
Assuming
to
human,
wisdom.
which most monks are human. I mean, you can be any race you want as a player character, but in terms of NPCs, like the vast majority of monks are human, and the ones that aren't are part human for the most part. It's really rare to see an NPC monk that isn't part human, that isn't at least part human. Normally, they're fully human.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's just.
Actually, that's what races have favorite class monk?
I don't think any. At
Huh.
least not in core. Definitely not any in core. Um,
I guess that could explain it. Um,
the only The monks very much favor humans. Like, yeah, if you look at the DMG, when you roll a monk, you'll then roll to see what race, and there's like a 96% chance of human. It's really high. Like and then and then I think there's like a 2% chance of half elf and half orc each. Like it's pretty crazy. Or maybe it's 95, and then you have like 1% chance other.
The Githzerai, they have favorite class monk.
Okay, but that's it's rare to have monk as a favorite class.
That's strange, though. Yeah, especially considering humans don't get, or a human monk doesn't get proficiency with unarmed strike.
What do you mean?
Monks are proficient with club, crossbow, light or heavy, dagger, hand axe, javelin, kama, nunchaku, quarterstaff, sai, shuriken, siangam, and sling. Not unarmed strike.
Yeah, but they also gain unarmed strike at first level, which gives them
The
which
feat
that
improved unarmed strike, which doesn't actually stop them from taking non-proficiency penalties.
I'm pretty sure improved unarmed strike actually makes you proficient with unarmed strike. Pretty sure that's one of the benefits of that feat. That's like how you gain proficiency with unarmed strike is improved unarmed strike.
The benefits are that you don't provoke attacks of opportunity when you attack the opponents unarmed, and also you can deal lethal damage with your unarmed strikes.
Which is
if you
kind
so
of the main
desire.
downsides of it.
Proficiency with unarmed strike comes generally from proficiency with simple weapons, because unarmed strikes are simple weapons. So most classes get proficiency with unarmed strike, aside from like the wizard, the sorcerer, and the monk.
I think that's splitting hairs because I'm pretty sure monks get
It's
that.
obviously an oversight, I know, but it's
like
funny.
very few DMs would rule that one. Like monks are very clearly proficient with unarmed strike. Like that's kind of their whole deal. Like they get unarmed strike at first level. Like that, yeah. There's no way that's not a thing. But yeah, so humans generally that, and humans are also the best race with in terms of whatchamajigger, vow of poverty, because human is, I believe, the only race in the game, or at least one of very few, that can gain a vow of poverty at first level.
Mm.
Vow of poverty requires the feat Sacred Vow, which isn't great, but just gives you like a +4 on diplomacy or something.
Yeah, you're going to have a tough time getting a fly speed then, though.
Not really. Still just go Dragonborn later.
Then you lose the feat.
Okay. Yes and no. There's ways around it. You'd lose that feat, but then you could also like give up a different feat instead. There's ways to deal with that. But I get what you're saying.
Aside from that, the Dragonborn ritual takes money or it takes materials worth gold to pull it off.
Yes, but if you can talk someone else into doing that for
and you
you,
can't borrow them from other people.
you're not borrowing it. Someone's just saying, "Yeah, I'll pay for that for you." That would be very similar to a potion. A ritual is not that much different than a potion. I'm pretty sure most DMs would allow something like that. Yeah, the graft is a little bit more of a gray area, but I think this one's less gray. It's more in the white, and that white is good. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Slow fall is really nice. I mean,
Featherfall is a first level spell, and you get a strictly worse version of Featherfall at level 20.
huh? This
Hmm?
is not level 20. Slow fall is 4th level.
You get 20 feet of slow fall at 4th level. Um, it improves over time up to level 20, where you can slow fall any distance, at which point it is still worse than Featherfall because you need to be next to a wall to make use of it.
Yes and no. Featherfall does require that, you have that cast on you and it doesn't last forever. Whereas Slowfall you just always have, and it's also an extraordinary ability, so works in anti-magic fields.
Uh, okay, I mean, a Ring of Featherfall works forever, and it's only 2,000 gold.
Okay, but does
Sorry,
take
2,200 gold.
it still takes up your ring item slot, which in core is more important than splat. Let's see what else. Purity of body. Um,
Purity of Body makes you
it's okay.
immune to non-magical diseases, right? All
Uh,
diseases except for supernatural and magical diseases, which leaves what? Filth fever? Uh, Nothing worth worrying about.
That's fair. Let's see. Wholeness of bot. That's still better than nothing. Like it's not great, but hey, it's worth something.
It's better than nothing unless you want to gain a disease. Um,
Um, yeah, I guess. Um, why would you want to gain a disease though?
Pregnancy.
Huh?
Does pregnancy count as a disease?
Whoa, dude. I'm pretty sure pregnancy is not a disease.
Okay.
Also, if you're a male monk, who cares?
Aside from that, I don't know. You could want a disease to have a disease so you can like fake being ill and beg beg for medical treatment or something. Or like
Okay, but
to have boils on your face. I don't know. It's not a high probability situation, but
I see.
neither is being in like having severe problems from a normal non-magical disease as a 5th level or higher character.
Okay, 9th level they get improved evasion. That's really good, and that's for you can't just get a ring for that one. That one you're really gonna need some levels in monk or rogue or
It's
something
all
like.
right, but you're probably going to be succeeding on your reflex saves anyways, so it's not as much of a benefit as normal evasion is.
Okay, fair, but you gotta give that improved evasion. It's pretty hard to get, um, aside from having the class levels for it.
It is pretty hard to get, yeah.
So and it's useful. Let's see. Diamond body's not bad. Immunity to poisons of all kinds. Just
Immunity
immune
to
to poison.
poison.
That's plenty. That's good.
It's better than purity of body, at least, but poisons aren't really a relevant strategy in battle at that level.
Let's see. Uh, Diamond soul. Let's
That's
see.
spell
Oh yeah,
resistance.
spell resistance. That's like we've talked about that. That's plenty good.
Yeah,
Monks are actually one of the best ways to getting good spell resistance. There's really
aside
not a lot of good ways to gain good spell resistance, and monks one of the best ways to do it.
race
Yes, you've
being
mentioned, although I'm pretty sure this
um,
would stack with that.
it would not stack with
It
that.
wouldn't. Oh, well, it's something. Let's see. We've already talked about quivering palm, timeless body, tongues of the sun and moon. I mean, basically just tongues, but with a slightly longer, or with a much longer name. Um,
Yeah. Well, tongues only lets you talk with intelligent creatures. Tongue of the Sun and Moon lets you speak with any living creature. So
so
you
that's
can speak to
better. You can talk
so
to
you can speak
dogs
to
and cats
plants.
and plants. Yeah. See.
Not that they're likely to say much that's useful.
Hey, a dog might. That you really underestimate how useful talking to a dog or a cat could be.
I
Um,
suppose I might, yeah.
like a lot of people keep them as pets, and a lot of people say things around their pets that, assuming that the information will never get out because no one has a way of communicating with them. Well, monks do, so they
As
can get in and talk to the big bad guy's dog and learn its weakness or his plan, or learn some info that they probably shouldn't have.
I mean, druids and rangers and bards can also do that.
Okay, true, but like that's still pretty good. Um, and it's an extraordinary ability. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure it is for druids and rangers and bards as well. I think.
No, it's just spell. I
See,
was talking about the spell speak with animals.
yeah, and tongues also is a spell. So,
So in the very, very, very niche case where you encounter a harmless, non-intelligent pet that happens to be sleeping or spending its time in an anti-magic field, you can the monk is able to talk with it without having to move the pet a few feet out until it's outside the anti-magic field.
okay, well, there's also options on that in terms of like you can talk to monsters and stuff like magical beasts, and try and diplomacy them. So a monk would actually, especially if you went the vow of poverty, at this point, if you decided to pick up like vow of peace and vow of nonviolence, you could very much, try and just diplomacy your way out of any sort of combat.
I mean, charisma's your dump stat, right?
Usually, but I mean, it doesn't have to be. Um,
No, no, it doesn't have to be. Just have five stats that you put points
or
in.
or if you're going to go with the vow of nonviolence and vow of peace, you probably wouldn't be putting like strength and up as one of your stats anyways. Like if you're going that route, strength is useless. So
Well, okay, if you're going that route, a lot of the monk class features are useless, more so than usual.
um, to some extent, yeah, you've got a point, but that's true of almost any class. Um, the monk stuff is a little less useful. Is a little
Well, vow
less
of
useless.
nonviolence still lets you do things like, let's see, you must not. Um, so vow of nonviolence, you can still do subdual damage. You can still use spells that lock people down, like
And, yeah, oh yeah, and and monks are one of the best at dealing non-lethal damage, so that's pretty good. Um, and they can still use their stunning fist, so they can still fight using non-lethal damage and stunning fist. Um, yeah. Let's see. And then at 20th level, monks get perfect stealth, which is a bit of a double-edged sword, admittedly. I mean,
yeah.
it does give. I mean, it makes you immune to a lot of spells, like any sort of person spell. You're going to be immune to because you're an outsider.
Yeah,
So,
so hold person, charm person, enlarge person. Only one of those three is a spell that you'd likely have that you'd likely have cast on you at level 20.
um,
And it's the one that helps you.
reduce person also. And if you had
Uh,
enlarged person and then permanency, it'd probably still work.
you're no longer a valid target for the spell since you're not a humanoid.
I'd say that's up to debate on whether that would still work. Um, and I mean, I'm sure you could come up with, I mean, you can create spells, so you could come up with just an enlarge monster spell. There'd be some effort required for that, but could be done. There are definitely rules in core for creating your own spells.
Uh, if you're, I guess, if you're at level 20, you could probably create better spells
You don't
than
even have to
that.
be level 20. At any level, you can create your own spells. There's just like rules for it. Like even a first level wizard can create their own spells. It's just they got to be 0 or first level spells, and it's really hard for them to do it. So it's unlikely it'll work. But they
I
can
mean, there are
try
guidelines for that. It's really, not like rules. It's really hard to implement that into a campaign in a way that's like balanced.
That's true. Although if you're doing something like just enlarge monster, that's not so bad. You look at, what the spell level difference between other person and monster spells that exist, and then you just kind of add that to enlarge person, and then call that what spell level it's going to be, and then come up with an appropriate DC and all that good stuff.
I guess.
Something like that's not too hard to do. As long as it's coming up with spells that are close to what already exists isn't that hard to do. It's when you're coming up with crazy stuff that doesn't, that there's really nothing to base it off of, that it starts becoming much harder to figure out how to implement it. But implementing things that
Okay.
are similar to what already exists is pretty easy.
Okay. Well, you seem pretty determined to salvage value out of every tiny little class feature the monk has, but you'd probably say that their best advantage compared to other melee combatants is being able to cover more ground.
Yeah.
To cover ground faster, right?
Yeah, that's probably
And
the biggest thing that they have. Other than that and the shenanigans that they have, but yeah, the covering ground is definitely a big one.
shenanigans.
Yeah, like timeless, like abundant step, empty body, slow fall. Um, the fact that tumble's one of their class skills, so they can use that to go through enemy squares somewhat easily.
It's not a shenanigan. That's a skill.
I get that, but these are a little bit of like they've got a lot of like weird kind of tricks that they're able to get around a lot of the more standard approaches.
Okay. Have you heard of a class called, or a prestige class specifically, called Horizon Walker?
I've heard of it. I have a video on that. That's one of the originals from the DMG. It has been like 6 years since I've made that video, and I haven't really looked at it since. So not the most familiar with it offhand, although my DMG is like right here.
Okay. Well, one of its probably its key it's one of the better options for melee if you're using only core sources. And one of its better advantages is how quickly it can cover ground. Specifically, once you hit level 6 in Horizon Walker, you can take the shifting planar terrain mastery and become able to use Dimension Door as a spell-like ability every 1d4 rounds.
That's pretty good.
And it's Dimension Door the caster level equal to your full character level, not half your monk level as the monk gets. So that lets you cover, let's see.
And it's not once per day. It's every 1d4 rounds, much like a Dragon's Breath weapon. Interesting.
Indeed. So that lets you cover like 800 feet every 1d4 rounds or so.
Yeah, and apparently that also gives you a +1 insight bonus on attack and damage against outsiders. And elementals native to a shifting plane. So it have to be native. Either one would have to be native to that. Which, okay, would definitely not be the monk, the 20th level monk, because they're outsider non-native. So that definitely disqualifies them. And even if they were native, almost certainly not a shifting plane. But I get your point.
Okay. I'm not saying specifically that, well, yeah, okay.
The Horizon Walker, it's okay. It's a good melee class. I could see in that.
Yeah, it also the Horizon Walker can cover more ground than the monk, significantly. They also get full base attack bonus and a number of little tricks, including potentially including bonuses on skill checks, immunity to fatigue, 30-foot tremor sense, some energy resistance, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely, it definitely gets past a lot of that. They are going to have to wait till fairly high level before they're capable of it, but
they're even probably better than the monk in an anti-magic field. Well, they get advantages that monks can't have in an anti-magic field, including tremor sense and energy resistance, which is pretty hard to do. So they're probably better than most characters in an anti-magic field, I'd say.
I'm looking at the terrain mastery.
And this is an option that's available in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yes, it is. I'm looking at... it's not saying what kind of ability the terrain mastery is anywhere. Trying to figure out whether this is an extraordinary or supernatural to see if your point of it working in an anti-magic field is valid or not. It's not mentioning anywhere what type it is, which is interesting. Because normally abilities will tell you whether they're extraordinary, supernatural, or spell-like. Which is weird. Now with this one...
They could also be natural abilities, right? I don't usually think that can be the case for class features, but where it's stuff like it probably isn't. That's not really a thing.
Is that a weird DMG oversight? No. Nope, because when I go to Dwarven Defender, all their stuff's extraordinary. It's specifically mentioned. Strange. Lore Master, it doesn't really say. Actually, it does. They're specifically mentioned as extraordinary. Whereas Horizon Walker, it doesn't say. It's the only one that I'm seeing that doesn't say. Which makes you wonder. Does it work in an anti-magic field?
Anything that isn't a supernatural ability or a spell-like ability works in an anti-magic field, right?
For the most part, but we don't know what kind of ability this is. If it doesn't say extraordinary, then we can't say for sure that it's not a supernatural or spell-like. I would say it's almost certainly not a spell-like.
Yeah. Well, it does not resemble a spell in many ways.
I'd say it's up to the DM's discretion. Now, personally, as a DM, I would probably rule that terrain mastery is extraordinary and planar terrain mastery is supernatural. Because that tends to be how things work for the most part. The lesser, not as good stuff is more likely to be extraordinary, and the more potent things tend to be supernatural. But it's really hard to say.
Okay. Well, definitely either way, the Dimension Door couldn't be used in an anti-magic field.
This is correct.
Because it is explicitly a spell-like ability.
Yes, this one, for some reason, it's not mentioned. I would rule it that way just because there's nothing said and the planar stuff is more powerful. Generally, the more powerful stuff that tend to duplicate the effects of spells, which I think is the case with most of the planar ones. Those generally are supernatural.
Okay.
So, whereas I think the regular ones don't really duplicate the effects of spells. They tend to be more minor bonuses. Yeah, they're just...
Right.
So that's how I'd rule that. But that's an interesting point you make, that the Horizon Walker certainly has some advantages that do put them very much in line with the monk on a lot of things. Now, they're not
the
going to...
aligned planar terrain mastery is also... It's a bit niche, but it's quite good in certain situations. Spells and abilities that harm those of the opposite alignment don't affect you. So you wouldn't be affected by, say, blasphemy or holy words. And aligned weapons, like a holy or unholy weapon, wouldn't have any extra effect on you.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, you would definitely want to be in extreme alignment if you went that way. What does it take for Horizon Mass? Knowledge... Wow, that's almost nothing. Knowledge Geography, 8 ranks, and then Feats Endurance. Wow, that's a really easy one to get into.
It is. Rangers get in a little easier. But yeah.
Oh, because they don't have to take the endurance feat.
Yeah.
And Knowledge Geography, I'm pretty sure, is a class skill for them.
That is correct.
Yeah. That's definitely a good point there.
But yeah, what with the fact that none of the melee classes, like fighters, run out of good feats to take. Barbarians probably get their best stuff in the first 4 levels or so. They're not bad in terms of taking more.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Not a bad option.
I definitely say Horizon Walker is the best option for melee in a core only game.
Especially if you're talking about melee that you want to get around the enemy. Especially if you're talking about melee that wants to get around the enemy.
Especially in that case, yeah. They get a bunch of the similar stuff to what monks get. Like mobility, a lot of mobility, and also a bunch of mildly useful other bonuses, mostly just mobility.
One of the
downsides without sacrificing their base attack bonus.
One of the downsides that I see is it is only every 1d4 rounds do they have that extreme mobility. Of course, they'll get it initially, but then they have to wait a little while, whereas the monk won't have to do that. They can only do the abundant step once per day, but they have their fast move speed. They have they have empty body. They have that tumble skill. That's not bad. And monks can use tumble a little more easy. They do get a lot of skill points. I mean, what is it? It's 4+ int. That's not bad. Their int, generally not their best stat, but they still have a nice skill pool to work with. And tumble is...
Horizon Walker also gets 4+ int.
Okay, true, but most of the classes that we're talking about, like fighters, only 2+ int. Fighters are really horrible with skills.
Right. here's another fun trick. The dimension door that Horizon Walker gets can actually be used to... hang on. Yes, it can be used to transport others. So for instance, if you were to ride a horse with horseshoes of speed, you could have 90-foot movement all the time. And then also use Dimension Door to go around places whenever you want.
I get what you're saying. Um, Although you wouldn't have a fly speed, which monks can get, and it's really, really
True.
hard to get a fly speed on a horse.
Is it?
Also, horses...
You could just cast Fly on it, or give it a magic item that gives it a fly speed.
Okay,
Actually,
but
no. Why? How is it easier to get a fly speed on a monk than on a horse?
Dragonborn do something like that, whereas I'm pretty sure horses do not meet the requirements for the ritual for Dragonborn. Pretty sure yeah, actually they definitely don't. Because one of the requirements are really lax, but one of them is an intelligence of 3, which horses do not meet.
Yeah. Also humanoid.
Yeah, so they don't meet either of the requirements, and that's it. That's it for. Wait, there is one more, which I think they. Well, no, the other one's non-evil, which um, they would meet typically, but still, they don't meet like the basic requirements for that, whereas monks definitely do.
Okay.
So there's that.
Well,
Also, another point on using a horse is getting a horse at early level. Like at early levels, okay, they're fine, but they do not scale at all. And there's really not a good way to scale them short of having them as your animal companion, which
there's ways.
requires
There are ways
druid
to scale
or ranger.
mounts in general. Maybe not a horse specifically. Well, there are some that work with a horse specifically. There's the paladin and the ranger and the druid all get a class feature that is improved horse. By which I mean special mount and animal companion,
Okay.
of course.
I was like, improved horse. I'm like, I know that they, like I was saying, yes, there's this, the animal companion. And the ranger's animal companion is only half druid, so it's okay. You'll get a decent enough horse at higher levels, but it's not the greatest. It's still somewhat easy to be taken out. Whereas with the
Your
druid,
horse doesn't need to be super well defended. If your enemies are attacking your horse instead of you, then that means that's generally a good thing because you're going to live longer.
not necessarily. There are things called area of effect spells, which will affect both you and your horse.
Sure. So you just defend a little more against those and a little less against attacks.
Horses. There's a lot of things with them. They tend to have low HP unless it's from one of those particular classes.
You can also, let's see, a wizard using Lesser Planar Binding, which is a 5th level spell, can get a Nightmare for you to mount, which has a 90-foot fly speed, just racially, and also 47 HP. Or if you're at higher levels, you could use Greater Planar Binding to get a Koshimar Nightmare, which has about 3 times that much HP.
Okay, I get what you're saying, but the point is, it's hard to do.
Or you could have the Druid or the Wizard polymorph into a dragon, or, well, the Wizard polymorph into a dragon, or the Druid wild shape into something.
A horse?
A horse, sure. Or like a bear. And then they, yeah.
Another downside is we are talking about a larger creature, so we're going up a size, a little harder that does affect your maneuverability a little bit. Also, you can't tumble past the lines really with a horse.
Well, in the case of the Horizon Walk, you can just teleport past them. In the case of if your mount is a flying creature, like a nightmare or someone polymorphed into a dragon or a cohort that is a dragon or a nightmare, then it can just fly past.
Okay,
It's very hard to body block people when they're
that's
flying.
that's fair. Although monks can
Um,
get cohorts too, and if you make your cohort, like my friend did, he made her an what was it, an Illumian, and then he made her a spellcaster, of course, because Illumian, and she just buffed the crap out of him pre-battle and everything. So there and also hit him with spells like when he would get trapped, she'd you know use like Dimension Door and stuff on him to get him around things. So having a spellcaster buddy definitely is helpful for a cohort.
Obviously, yeah, that's true for any character,
Yes, but
even if they're a spellcaster themselves.
that this is true. I've seen a lot of although I have seen melee. I have seen it the opposite. I did have a guy who was a caster, and his cohort was a pure fighter, just straight fighter for a cohort.
Okay.
So it's not necessary, but
Another
yeah.
thing you could, if the large space of the mount is a problem, you could play as a small character and then have a medium-sized mount.
That's true. The size isn't the huge issue. It does affect things a little, but not a ton. The bigger issue is the fact that you really can't tumble with a mount. Like,
Depends. In core, yeah, it's hard to get a horse to tumble.
or even if you did tumbling while tumbling with somebody riding your back is problematic. I would say most
that's not
DMs,
something they're written like
that's true, but
reasons not to do.
that's true, but that's because people, I don't think when they were writing the rules, they ever expected a mount to use tumble while somebody was writing them. So I would say that most DMs in such a situation would put some fairly significant penalties on something like that, because it is a lot harder to tumble safely while someone is riding on your back. It's way harder to do that. Like, imagine like trying to do a somersault past the guy normally. That's a skill. Trying to do that while giving someone a piggyback ride, that's way, way harder.
Are you suggesting that tumble checks literally mean people are doing somersaults in combat? Because that's impractical to start with, regardless of riders or whatnot.
Doing something similar to the sort. I mean, it is tumbling, so they are doing some sort of a roll past. It would definitely be something, not necessarily a somersault, like not necessarily truly a somersault, but definitely something similar.
Would you impose similar penalties on jump checks then? And
Uh,
balance checks and all sorts of checks that involve movement to a
well,
creature that has a rider?
well, jumping, no, because the challenge with jumping is just the extra weight. So you would have to deal with the extra weight of the rider, but that's really not any harder beyond that. Um, the problem with tumble is you are contorting your body to get past this guy and trying to contort your body as well as the body of the rider that's on your back is going to be tricky to do. It's going to be hard to tumble past somebody while safely, but then also keep the guy who's on top of you safe. That's going to be real tough. With jumping,
Okay.
not really. Like, there's really no extra challenge to jumping with having someone on you than without. Same with a lot of the other ones. Tumble is it's really hard to do with somebody on your back.
Okay, well, I can see where you're coming from. That would be a house rule, though.
That is true. There are not rules, but most DMs would put something in place should their mount try and make a tumble check. Most
Okay.
DMs would see something wrong with a mount making a tumble check and would rule something to make it more difficult.
I have not met most DMs, so you would know better than I would.
Fair enough.
Uh, okay.
I would definitely throw something on that for something like that because, yeah, that just doesn't make sense. Oh yeah, monks
I'm
they
not
also
sure.
they get their AC bonus, so that's kind of nice. And that one will stack into epic.
I think that's
Basically,
usually outpaced by armor, though.
the what?
The AC bonus from a monk. I mean, it's good at low levels. It's good at like uh, early on, like just at level 1, having Dex and Wisdom to your armor class. That's great. But then, as you get into the mid levels, like 6th level or so, like a mithril chain shirt starts being super affordable, and that's going to be, and that's +4 to armor class, maximum dex bonus +4,
Well, you could get a
or
monk
no,
spell.
+6 even with mithril, and then no armor check penalty. So most people aren't going to have much reason not to wear that unless they're an arcane spellcaster, a druid who can't wear metal armor,
Or a
or
monk.
a monk.
Okay, but you could
And,
also use a
and then it
monk's
levels.
belt, and you also have bracers of armor.
I'm sorry, a monk spell on a monk? That's
Yeah,
only going to give you like +1 on your armor check, on your armor class. I mean,
depends
you
on the
can,
level.
yeah,
Could
it's
be 2.
reasonable. But the main benefit is the unarmed damage bonus.
You're right. Actually it would be exactly +1 because you're a monk of 5 levels higher, correct?
Yep.
So that would be exactly +1 since they gain it every 5 levels, and that does extend into epic. So once you're 20th level, you would get that +5. It would be a +5, not the +4.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah, but the ones who get the most benefit from Monk's Belt is
non-monks, yeah,
druids.
yeah,
It's,
druids.
it's much easier to keep monks a belt functional and wild shape than it is to keep a full set of armor.
Okay, that's true. Although there's monk's belt plus bracers of armor plus amulet of natural armor plus ring of protection. You can get some pretty nice bonuses from all that.
Well, oh, okay.
Now, most of that, yes, I
Things
will
like
say that.
Amulet of Natural Armor and Ring of Protection are available to anyone.
Yes, that is true. I
So,
was going to say that, but yeah.
basically you have the monks, the monk with um, their wisdom to AC, and their small the rest of their AC bonus, and their bracers of armor, competing with the mithril chain shirt, which is basically going to be bracers of armor +4, right? And the monk still pulls ahead on AC, but just a little bit than that, I think.
Not quite, because braces of armor can go up to a +8. So at 20th level, you'd be
Yeah, but
looking.
it costs the same to improve the bracers of armor as it does to enchant the chain shirt.
Okay, fair enough. But in terms of like actual maximum bonus to your AC itself, we're looking at for a monk, you have your +4 from your AC, plus 8, plus so 4 plus wisdom plus 8. Whereas with your chain shirt, you're looking at 4 plus 5, so you're looking at just 9, just a flat 9. Whereas this, it's 4 12 plus wisdom, so that's 3 more plus wisdom.
Well, okay, so you're comparing +8 bracers of armor there to a
Well,
+5 chain shirt. When you
I
really should be comparing it to a +5 fortification, medium fortification chain shirt.
okay. Well,
Uh,
even if we went with +5, um, then we're still looking at the same. We're still looking at 9 plus wisdom versus just plus 9. So
Wait, what? 9 plus... Oh, yeah. Okay, sure, yeah.
so
Wait.
this one, at least you're getting wisdom, whereas you're getting the same numbers plus wisdom, whereas with that, you don't even get the wisdom. So there's that.
Oh,
Plus if you do enough...
plus 9? So you're saying at 20th level, then?
Yeah, I'm saying 20th level, going with just the maximum AC. So you're talking about the highest possible non-epic AC you can potentially get would be a plus 5 chain shirt versus a plus 5 bracers of armor, which would be roughly the same cost. Actually, bracers of armor a little less, but negligibly so, because you'd have to pay for the actual chain shirt and then the mithril component if you wanted that. So that would add another 1,000 plus another 25 or some small not super significant amount. But
okay, so the monk pulls ahead there. Reasonable. Except there's one other thing, because around level 10-ish, you start being able to afford an animated shield, which uses up no hands. And the monk doesn't have an equivalent to that. So pretty much anyone other than a monk who can use a shield is going to want to use an animated shield. Animated's +2 enhancement.
Okay, that'll get you another 7. All right, but at the same time, if you have the monk's belt, that gives you another +1, so that negates it to 6. So all the monk would have to do is have at least a +6 wisdom, which, come on, they're probably going to have more than a +6 wisdom, so they are going to pull ahead.
Are you counting dexterity?
I'm not counting dexterity, because I'm assuming both...
Dexterity is the monk's 4th most important stat. It's also probably the fighter's 4th most important stat, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming dexterity to be a neutral, because both classes can use that. Although if you factor that in, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to add your dex to AC anymore, whereas the monk can keep doing that forever.
What?
So, huh?
But the monk isn't going to be able to keep adding dexterity forever, right?
What do you mean?
Probably going to...
Well, yeah, they
get like 12 dexterity or so.
But monks don't require
as 18 from an enhancement bonus, and then that's basically going to be it until they can afford to get an inherent bonus for their 4th most important stat, which will be a while, right? And then after that, there's nothing.
Not as long as you would think, because yes, I was talking about how monks can use quarterstaffs, but a lot of the time they won't. Or if they do, they'll keep them fairly. They won't spend too much money on them. So monks actually end up spending a lot less money than a lot of other classes on things like weapons, which are crazy expensive, because they can just
the Amulet of Mighty Fists is 3 times as expensive as an equivalent magic weapon.
Okay. All right, if you wanted to go with that route, not entirely necessary, but probably a good idea for a monk. But monks tend to require less money than other classes, so they're able to afford more. They're able to afford these things more easily than other classes can. So that's kind of an advantage there. They're able to sink more money into upping their stats more easily than other classes, because they don't have all these other things that are money pits that a lot of the other classes do.
Such as?
Weapons, armor.
Amulet of Mighty Fists, and you still need to pay for your bracers of armor.
Okay, that's true, but they don't have to pay for that shield.
That is true. The shield is a cost that they save.
Yeah, it would be quite
Uh,
expensive. It would, especially since animated, not what is? I don't think that's a +1, is it? Isn't it like a +3 or something?
+2.
+2? Yeah, so that's going to add a fair amount of cost to it.
Okay.
So monks have a lot less expenses. You have a point with the Amulet of Mighty Fist, sure, or the
Well, they
Quarterstaff if they wanted to go that way, but
okay. So they have. So instead of putting money into an animated shield, a monk is going to be putting money into raising their tertiary stat. Is that what I'm hearing?
something like that, yeah. There's a lot of things that they could choose, but that is one option. Although wisdom would be the one they would be raising first, of course. Getting that up as high as possible. I know that the monk my friend played, his stats were insane, or his saves were insane. His AC was ridiculous. His attacks were almost on par with our fighters, although the fighter he was using the dual wielding build, using a long sword and a short sword, or I think it might have just been two long swords, and
Well, no wonder he outdamaged them. I,
it's not the most efficient build. He dumped most of his feats into the two weapon fighting feats, as well as the weapon focus and weapon specialization feats. Um, I think he even put some into the two weapon defense feats,
oof. Okay.
which so he was uh, I think he was out damaging the fighter. He didn't have as many attacks as the fighter, who had like 9 attacks versus the monk's, 5 or 6 with the tail. But still, um, yeah, he was a combo strength finesse fighter. Uh,
Okay. Well, that's probably a good point to leave off on then. I'm still not convinced about the monk.
I am,
That
after experiencing my friend play the monk and just really be a thorn in my side as the DM, with just how crazy effective he was.
okay.
The monk, he was by far the most powerful person in the party, like without a
Okay.
doubt.
Well, I mean, sometimes good players will take vow of poverty specifically to limit themselves. That as like a challenge, or to be more on par with the rest of the party.
Well,
That
no, he
could
did.
be
He
what
did
you
it for the
experienced in that
advantages.
game.
No, he did it because he's like, wow, this is really good for a monk. I'm going to gain so much.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, he did it at mid levels. Vow of Poverty is pretty good though, especially with the fact that every other level they gain a bonus feat. Yes, it has to be
An exalted bonus feat,
an
with most
exalted.
of which are like
A few of
not
them,
good.
a few of them are pretty. A few of them
Monk
are
has a
pretty
couple
good.
good ones. They get intuitive attack and touch of golden ice, and then like that's it.
Yeah, those
Everything
two
else
he
is side
definitely
effects.
grabbed because intuitive attack is. I mean, if you're going to go with a monk with a Vow of Poverty, take intuitive attack. Like you like you have like there's no reason not to, because that makes you that one lets you use wisdom as your for your attack roll, right?
For you to hit my player. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so you're able to attack more, so you're able to hit more often, so that that's
Yeah,
definitely a
it's
great
certainly
one.
a good option. Definitely better than weapon finesse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
um,
and
and
then
touch of
touch of
golden
golden
ice.
ice gives a low DC save or dexterity damage on every hit against an evil creature, which is not bad,
it's
specifically because it happens every hit. Otherwise, it would be
It's
very bad.
actually it is absolutely insane. It is so good when fighting against evil creatures. Like, Oh, because especially seeing as it's based off of wisdom, so whew, that thing is so nasty on a monk. Um, yeah,
I mean, or you could just play another class. You could play another class and then just kill them.
other ones that are pretty good for Exalted would be like I was saying before, Vow of Peace, Vow of the other vows. They're all valid candidates. So you can use the Vow of Poverty to take other vows for free,
Well,
basically.
okay, picking Vow of Peace basically shifts you into like an entirely different game.
Yes, it
Um,
does. But there are other ones like Vow of Abstinence and Vow of Chastity. Like those don't really change things too much. Though
pretty minor effects though.
that's true, but for effectively free, that's not bad. Although
Except it's not free. You're paying like 800,000 gold for it.
actually, it scales with level, but yes, I get your point. Which is why it might be better to take this later after you've already become Dragonborn and got your tail graft. Maybe read a few tomes. Just spend all your money on upping all your stats with tomes, and then jump into this, and then take
Sure.
the vow of poverty.
Yeah, that's probably, I'd say, the most effective way to make use of Vow of Poverty. Even if the fact that you, even if the fact that it so severely restricts the magic items you use is still probably going to be a big hit. Like, you can't use wands, you can't use, you can't use wands. I mean, if that was the only effect of Vow of Poverty, you get all the bonuses and then you can't use wands, that would still be like a debatable feat, I think.
You really put high stock into wands.
I do, yes.
And I've seen you use them a lot, but you've also played casters, so that we're able to use them more easily. I've never seen you play anyone that wasn't at least kind of a caster. I mean, even Marmalade was a little bit of a caster.
Yeah, well, there is a reason for that, yeah.
Um, the reason for that with Marmalade was probably more so for the bardic inspiration than anything, but gaining some caster levels to be able to use wands was probably part of it as well, knowing
That was a
you.
bit of it, yeah. I
But
mean, what can I say? Spellcasting is good. It is, it is the good.
but there are a lot of benefits to it. But in terms, but you guys have really whined and complained whenever I threw anti-magic fields at you, because those just throw you guys so bad, because almost the entire party is casters and almost nobody can do anything. Where it's generally good to have someone who's still pretty effective, even in an anti-magic field, which
No one is effective in an anti-magic field unless they specifically build to be effective in an anti-magic
that's not
field.
quite
And
true.
building specifically to be effective in an anti-magic field still usually involves magic.
That's not entirely true. Fighters, they lose stuff, but they're still pretty effective in an anti-magic field. Their weapons just become mundane, and so do their armor. But other than that, they're still just as effective. So they're still doing close to the same damage and still avoiding most of the hits.
Aside from that, there generally isn't that much like anti-magic as written in the game.
And,
Like
and
the
really,
spell itself, anti-magic field, only goes out to 10 feet, and you have to be a high-level spellcaster centering it on yourself to use that.
there really
Um,
is like the
and then there are
at higher
beholders,
levels, there's a
which
lot. There's so much stuff that uses anti-magic field. It's um, the,
maybe in the epic level handbook, are you saying?
there's some in there, yeah, for sure. But even things like oh, what was their name? Beholders, like
Okay, a beholder is built to be a solo encounter. One of the reasons it has an anti-magic field is because that turns off most of its other abilities.
Yes and no. It's in a cone, and they're able to use it. It's able to use its other abilities, not in the cone. So, but you're right about that. Although it's not necessarily, it actually works really good for not a solo encounter. Um,
Well, yeah, because it's balanced with the intent that it will be one. Like that's why they have the specific racial fluff of beholders hate everything else, including other beholders, and will not work with another creature.
okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. I still say monks are one of the more overpowered classes in the game. Like there's just so much they can do. There's a lot of really situational stuff that they can do, and that'll fit a lot of different situations. Like there's a lot of weird situations that you typically end up in D&D, and the monk can weather most of those better than a lot of other classes. You get imprisoned by the guards. Well, the monk can handle that a little better than most classes. Um, a thief steals your stuff in the middle of the night. Well, the monk's not hurting as bad as everybody else, because most of the stuff that they have, they keep on them. You know what I mean? Like,
Damage reduction.
what do you mean?
That is a very common problem to face, and monks do not deal with it as well as others because they rely on
What?
a large number of low damage attacks.
They have
They get
key
key
strike.
strike,
Key
which
strike just
overcomes some kinds of damage reduction.
most.
Um,
It'll overcome most
they
damage
overcome.
reduction.
Hmm?
Key strike overcomes most damage reduction.
It overcomes magic, lawful, and adamantine.
Which adamantine will overcome a lot of different things. Adamantine's a pretty nasty one. That's one of the better damage reductions to get. That's one of the better typings to have. That'll overcome most damage reductions.
Okay. Well, really? Okay. I don't know. I don't pour through. I haven't gone through like loads of monsters
And there's
stat
ways
entries.
to.
So if you say DR adamantine is like the most common kind of DR, then sure.
It
But
gets through a
and a lot
lot
of
of
people
stuff, and there's
overcome
also
DR
ways to
silver
get
as
other
well
things
by
like.
silver sheening their fists.
There's also ways to
Um,
get silver and to put other kinds of DR to put other kinds of what is it even called to put other kinds of properties on your fists. There are definitely ways to do it.
sure,
Um,
but a good melee character can just do so much damage that the DR doesn't matter.
these days, that's
With
not
power
that.
attack.
It's, yes, but with power attack, you're lowering your attack roll. Yes, you can. There's ways to put that on AC instead, but still, like that has its downsides. Like
Well,
making yourself
even
really easy
aside
to
from
hit.
Shock Trooper, there are a bunch of ways to outside of core. If you're using a lot of source books, there are ways to get your melee attacks as touch attacks. Like you can dip a level in Acetokineticist or use energy substituted flame blades from wands, or use Wraith Strike.
There are ways to
Um,
do it with monk too. Yeah, you get a weapon with key strike, a monk weapon with key strike, or and then you put ghost touch on it.
Ghost Touch doesn't make your attacks touch attacks. It just lets them hit ethereal things or incorporeal things.
Hmm. That works. That'll get through a lot of things. Um,
It doesn't let them bypass armor.
hmm.
I mean, Brilliant Energy does, and it's a +4 ability, but
See,
that's not usually as good as a touch. That's much worse than making touch attacks because it doesn't go through natural armor, which is the really common one.
Depends on what you're go up against.
Sure.
Against monsters, fair. Against PCs and NPCs, no. Natural armor's usually +5 at best against players and NPCs, which isn't a whole lot. You're going to be getting way more from actual armor than from natural armor.
Okay.
Against monsters, yes, I will give that to you. But against most monsters, the monks can get past that without too much problem.
By putting brilliant energy on their fists?
Sure, yeah. They don't even need a touch attack. Like, they can just make
touch attacks too. Yeah, that's fine. But I'm saying that touch attacks let you power attack much more reliably. Like,
okay.
Like, I have looked at a distribution of the armor classes.
Monks can power attack too, by the way.
Huh?
Monks can power attack too.
They can, but not well.
They can do it okay.
They get 1-to-1 damage.
It's not the end of the world. Although, like I say, if you end up restrained, there's various ways that can happen. Monks can still attack. Like, I'm pretty sure monks might even be able to attack while grappled, depending on how it's done. Like,
yeah, it's possible to attack with like a light weapon in a grapple, which would include unarmed strike.
Yeah, so even while grappled, a monk can still full attack you.
Well, okay. I don't see how that's relevant, and also you can get that with a pretty cheap weapon ability, I think.
Well, I mean, if you get hit with something like Kelp Strand and there's an enemy right in front of you, that Kelp Strand's not going to do much. Like, you can still full attack despite the Kelp Strand.
It will do much. The enemy will step away from you, and then you still have to escape from... Huh?
Potentially, although wholeness of body, like, that's...
Also, grappling only lets you attack your opponent, like the one who's grappling you, with an unarmed strike. So no, in fact, if you were kelp stranded as a monk, you would not be able to attack somebody standing in front of you. Unless you escape the grapple, which monks do have escape artists as a class skill.
They do. And Dex is one of their better stats. That is one of the skills that monks do tend to put a lot of ranks into: tumble, escape artist, jump, things like that.
And then they're out of skill points: tumble, escape artist, and jump, because they only get 4+ int skill points per level.
So you're assuming they have a negative intelligence?
Yeah.
I don't know about that one. I would imagine it'd be at least positive. It would be at least 0, most likely. Depends on how you roll, really. And, getting out of things, you can always use empty body. That will very easily break any grapple. Almost any grapple.
Sure.
Assuming that the thing grappling you isn't ethereal or force or something, in which case that won't help.
The monk, so the monk can get out of grapples. Sure, anyone can if they have freedom of movement. How is this relevant?
I think freedom of movement's even something you get for whatchamajigger.
Poverty, yeah, it is. Or you can get it with a magic item.
Yeah, which monks would almost certainly get. They, what do you mean? How is it relevant?
I mean, I was talking about power attack and armor class, and like touch attacks.
Okay, I get what you're saying with that. My point.
Sorry, it was just a bit. So I had something I wanted to say about power attack.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
So across all the monster manuals, the average armor class of printed monsters by challenge rating is about 14 plus the challenge rating.
Okay.
It's closer to 12 plus challenge rating at lower levels, like below 10. Um, can you guess what the average touch AC is based on the challenge rating?
Yeah, it'd be pretty low. Touch AC for most monsters is really bad. So if I had to guess, 15, 20?
Average touch AC is 10. Not 10 plus challenge rating, 10. It actually goes down to like 9-ish at higher challenge ratings. It goes down with challenge rating. So
that's because size, but yeah.
But yeah, if you're making touch attacks, then you can power attack for as much as you want, basically, and it's not going to be a problem, as long as you have at least a plus 10 to hit from strength.
And how are you making the touch attacks again?
Level in Acetokineticist, or a Wand of Flame Blade, or Wraith Strike, or Emerald Razor Maneuver from Tome of Battle, or let's see.
Okay, some of those are fairly obscure. Some of them aren't.
Well, Flame Blade is a druid spell, which is
like I
in
said,
the player's handbook.
Yeah, Flame Blade. I think Wraith Strike's fairly common too. I think Wraith Strike's fairly common too.
Yeah, it's in the spell compendium.
Yeah, so that's not too far out. That's core splat. That if you want to call it that.
Right.
Which is something I'm very much, which is a distinction I very much make. Your core splat being anything from the compendium, the compendium books, or the race books, or the complete books, or the situation, not situation, the environment books like Cityscape, Dungeonscape, stuff like that. Was it Frostburn and Stormwrecked and all that good, and the desert, I forget what the desert one's called. But those books, Sandstorm, that was it. So those books are like your core splat, and then everything else is well, not everything. There's a few other ones that I'd kind of lump in there too, like Book of Exalted Deeds, Book of Vile Darkness, the two Fiendish compendiums, stuff like that. They're fairly core, but yeah.
It's okay. Are you saying core here in the sense of like does not introduce new like subsystems that aren't psionics? So
pretty much,
the exceptions there would be like Tome of Magic, Tome of Battle, Magic of Incarnum, Weapons of Legacy, those sorts of books.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, and then just kind of like random, just your random books that add weird stuff here and there, like what Heroes of Horror.
I kind of say the Fiendish Codexes would fit into
a little bit. They're a little less
random stuff.
It's not a super. The line blurs a little. But I would at the very least say Book of Exalted Deeds and Book of Vile Darkness are pretty core. Especially seeing as they do gain their names from magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Okay. I think Vile Darkness is technically 3.0 material, right?
Might be.
Okay. Yeah, there's also the Find the Gap spell and spell compendium, although that only works for one attack per round. And there's the Deep Impact feat from Expanded Psionics Handbook, although that needs you to expend your psionic focus to use it. So those aren't as good options.
And I believe in terms of touch attacks, I believe, one thing that the monks do get for a touch attack, I believe, Stunning Fist, that does, same with Stunning Fist, and then as well as Quivering Palm. I believe those only require a touch attack, not an actual attack. To make
It requires a foe to be damaged by your unarmed attack. So if you can damage someone on an unarmed attack as a touch attack, then yes, you can use Stunning Fists
interesting.
on it. Or Quivering Palm, if the monk strikes successfully and the target takes damage from the blow.
Interesting, because yeah, I know the rules for Quivering Palm are almost identical to Stunning Fist. The save
So-
VCs actually is identical.
Yeah.
Some good things that you could do with it. I know one decent way to cross would be if you were to do Paladin and then do the Asiatic Monk. That's not a terrible option.
Adriatic? Do you mean ascetic monk?
That's how you say that? I always said Asiatic. Huh.
I think it's ascetic.
You might be right. I don't exactly cast pronunciation guides in these, but it's not a bad way to do it. You got to keep most of your stuff, so
I'm not quite familiar with ascetic paladin, was it?
I think it's ascetic monk because I think ascetic
Ascetic knight. No, ascetic refers to the monk
okay.
side of it. Like ascetic is being like humble,
Interesting.
Like the poor kind of
Interesting.
like not being.
Okay.
Okay, so paladin and monk levels stack for unarmed strike damage and also smite evil damage, and you can multi-class freely between them.
It's okay.
Sure, I guess.
It's a weird mix though. There's not a lot of synergy between the classes.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, you can add your charisma. Like one of the best things about the paladin that they add their charisma to their saves.
I mean, if you're going in on the monk side of this, then you're basically adding smite evil to a monk, which is a bit awkward because you won't have many uses per day of that. So it's hard to get value out of that. If you're going in more levels on the paladin side, then you're basically adding unarmed strike to a paladin, which I don't know why you'd want to use unarmed strike if you were a paladin.
It's a weird one for sure. Yeah, now that I think about it, there isn't a ton of synergy. Although to your point that you mentioned earlier about assuming that they were going to have negative stats. Now, one of the things that I personally recommend for monks is if you roll for your stats and they come out fairly balanced or like pretty good for the most part, like you don't get a lot of bad stats. You just get like a bunch of pretty good stats or some really good stats. That's when you'd really want to look at monk a little heavier because you can take advantage of all those. Monks can take advantage of a lot of good stats better than other classes can because they're so stat dependent.
That's one take, I suppose.
Like a wizard is like, wow, I got all 18s. Great. Now I have an 18 strength. This is not that helpful for me. Whereas, a monk, like, sweet, all 18s, I'm going to put this to good use. I get to have lots of skills. I get to be charismatic. Nice. Like, even their dump stats are kind of useful to pretty much everybody. So, like, the monks can make much better use of really good all-around stats than other classes can.
Which is important if you're rolling your stats and not point buying them, I suppose.
This is true. If you're point buying, monks are a little harder to make work, but they definitely are they're definitely a decent option. Personally, I would use a lot of 14s if I was going monk. Because I wouldn't want to dump my dump stats too hard. If anything, I would dump my charisma.
Okay. Here's a little riddle for you. Which which class works well if you have no good stats?
Ooh,
Like if you had just like a 5 in everything, what would you want to play?
that's a tough one. Well, first off, to that point, you would
You could
use the
re-roll
rules
it.
that say just re-roll.
Yeah.
But assuming you weren't doing that, uh, ooh, that's tough. 5 in everything. Um, Probably not a casting class because you wouldn't be able to use any of your spells. Um, maybe a rogue. Rogue might be okay with. Rogue would probably be one of the better ones with just absolutely garbage stats. Because you
You think
definitely don't
so?
want to go caster because you can't. Like, I have these spells, but I can't cast anything. Um, uh, Things like fighter and barbarian would suffer pretty heavy, but at least rogues get their sneak attack still. So
True. So as long as they can hit, um, like if they're making touch attacks, maybe they'll be all right.
yeah, well, they're going to be
Although they
terrible.
can't
Like,
they
but
can't take the 2-weapon fighting feats because those require
yeah,
um,
but
dexterity.
if your stats are just garbage, I think the rogues would be the least terrible option because there really is no good option if all your stats are fives. But
That's not a bad answer. Now I would say for that warlock still
okay,
functions pretty well.
not super
Um,
familiar with that one at this point, but
okay, then maybe we should discuss that later. I think this has probably been enough.
yeah, I'm not sure how long this video is because in order to check that, I have to.
Close to 3 hours, I think.
Wow, 3 hours. That is going to be by far the longest video on the channel.
And it was also super rambly and off topic. Sorry about that.
That's all good. That is typical for a D&D game, but we mostly stuck to the facts of whether monks good or not. I think we still disagree on that because I still believe they're good, and I'm
And
pretty
I
sure you.
still believe they're not.
Okay, so we still
I,
disagree.
I, I don't think they're the worst class in the game. I could name 5 classes worse than the monk that are meant for PCs.
Okay. Well, so I mean, I don't think they're the best class, but they're up there. But yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess it's time to sign off. So, guys, if you enjoyed this video, I know it was really long. Hopefully you stuck around to the end. Please consider giving it a like. If also, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so. Maybe ring that bell. And if you
Like
have
this
anything you
video
want
if
to
you
add,
liked this video. Subscribe to videos if you want more videos. Comment on the video if you have a comment on the video and you want us to hear your comment on the video. Mitch will hear it. I will also hear it with our eyes. That is called reading.
yes. So yeah, if you guys, I'm curious what you guys think about whether monks are good or bad, because there is a lot of debate. I've talked with people who think it's one of the best classes in the game, and several who think it's one of the worst. Um, from my very small sample size, it seems to be along age lines because the oldest person I've talked to was the one who thinks monks are the best, and Ryan is the youngest person I've talked to, and he's the one who's most adamant that they're bad. So, and it seems to follow along that line from my very small sample size of about 5 or 6. So, could be wildly off. But I'm curious if anyone else has noticed a trend like that. Yeah, anyways, trying to do the wrap up. So yeah, like, subscribe, comment. And as always, I'm Mitch. I'll be seeing you.